Hello and welcome to the sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Invitational in Las Vegas. I'm Ken Crocker here with modern player extraordinaire Jeff Hoogland. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm fantastic, Ken.
Well, as always, Jeff, you've decided to, march to the beat of your own drum, and we have a modern deck that I presume you're the only player in the room playing.
Good chance.
Grixis Fairies.
Yep.
So why Grixis Fairies? First of all, why Grixis? Because Fairies are usually a blue-black deck.
Yeah, so as many people who play Modern are probably aware, one of the best cards in the format is Lightning Bolt.
It's pretty good.
And we're even going so far as basically play 6 Lightning Bolts with the inclusion of Burst Lightning in the main deck.
2 Burst Lightnings?
Yep. So the traditional blue-black Fairies has a really hard time against more aggressive decks like Burn and Affinity, and just having a lot of cheap interaction for those matchups makes those matchups go from bad to actually pretty favorable for this deck.
All right, so let's talk about the creature package that you're running, because it's pretty important to the Fairies deck.
Yep.
You're running 4 Spell Stutter Sprite.
Yep.
You're running 3 Scion of Una, 3 Vendilion Click, and 4 Snapcaster Mage. Now,
honorary Fairy Snapcaster
yeah, I was going to say, now Snapcaster Mage isn't a Fairy, so, we'll talk about that at some other time off camera. But the real question is, why only 3 Scion of Una? It seems like that's a real big reason to play such a tribal heavy deck.
Yeah, so Scion's pretty important, but he's also can be kind of clunky. Modern's a pretty quick format overall, and we want to be able to have copies of Vendilion Click, Initiative Scion, and things like Culligan's Command and Cryptic Command, and there's only so much room to have those expensive spells in your deck game 1 against a lot of things. Speaking of Culligan's Command, it also kind of raises our virtual count of Scion of Una, because you can rebuy them once they die.
Sure. So that's basically what you're splashing black for, is for removal spells in the main deck at least. You mentioned the Culligan's Command. You have 1 Murder's Cut and 1 Dismember. I gotta ask how the black splash affects your mana base. We know that Modern is a format that can have greedy mana bases, but you don't want to get hit by Blood Moon or anything, so...
Yeah, I think the mana base in this deck is pretty conservative overall as far as that goes. We've got 8 fetch lands and then 3 black sources, a Blood Crypt, a Water Grave, and a Creeping Tar Pit.
Sure.
We only have single black spells, period, and we only have a couple of black spells in the main deck. There's no basic swamp, so essentially you just board out the black cards in matchups where you expect to get Blood Moon, and then you can play around it pretty effectively with your 3 basic islands and 8 fetch lands to get those islands.
Fair enough. And you probably counter it too, as you're running a pretty heavy counter suite in this deck. You're running
definitely.
2 Spell Snares, 2 Cryptic Commands, 3 Mana Leaks, and 3 Mamans. So I have to assume you just weren't throwing darts at a dartboard. Like, why these numbers?
So the Mana Leak Remand split is because this deck has a pretty hard time against Lingering Souls, which while isn't super popular, I want to hedge it a little bit. So Remand allows us to do that by picking up the back half.
Okay.
And because we don't have a lot of hard removal in the main deck, it's important to actually counter things like Tarmogoyfs and Siege Rhinos and other bigger creatures like that. So Mana Leak does that really nicely.
Fair enough. So one thing that's really interesting, we go back to the mana base a little bit, is you actually have 6 creature lands in this deck. Only 2 of which come into play taps, so you at least kept down your come into play tap lands.
Yep. But
you're actually running 4 Mutavault along with 1 Creeping Tar Pit and 1 Fairy Conclave.
Yep.
Now, I understand that Mutavault's a very important part. It's a virtual fairy, among other things. It's also a human wizard to go with your Snapcaster Mage synergies.
Yep.
But it has to be hard when you're playing a 3-color deck to play 4 colorless lands.
Yeah, so the important thing to note about this deck too is that unlike a lot of blue decks in this format, we're not playing Serum Visions or Anticipates or other cantrips like that. So in order to incorporate these additional color sources, we actually just play more lands than a lot of decks do. So there's 24 lands altogether in the deck. So we have 20 colored mana sources, which is even more than some of the land-like decks play.
Sure, something like Zoo probably isn't running that many either. All right, so speaking of those kind of aggressive decks, let's go to the sideboard where you're obviously trying to shore up some matchups.
Yep.
You got some Engineered Explosives, Spell Skites, things we kind of see. You got some more counter magic and counter flux, Flash Freeze Negate. But I really want to talk about the additional black cards that you're bringing in from the sideboard.
Yep.
So we have 2 Thoughtseize, a Go for the Throat, a Dreadbore, and another Murder's Cut.
Yep.
So Dreadbore and Go for the Throat, not exactly Modern staples. Why are they in here?
I think Dreadbore should be played more than it is in Modern. The instant speed's important from a card like Terminate, but it's also a drawback because Dispel is very popular in Modern, and with the Grixis decks moving more towards playing Jace, Dreadbore kills a flip Jace for you. It kills a Liliana, it kills Ugin and Karn. As far as Go for the Throat goes, its Can't Destroy an Artifact clause is actually an upside as opposed to a drawback. We have enough removal spells against Affinity that we don't need it, and when you bring it in against things like Twin, they can't Spellskite Go for the Throat because it can't target an artifact creature.
Oh, so that's a little nice interaction in Modern, just in case. just maybe shore up that twin matchup that some people might be worried about.
Or Infect, they have spell skies to protect their guys, like they can't redirect it.
So this seems like a tempo kind of style deck. Exactly what decks do you want to not run into with this kind of deck?
The matchups that are hard are the ones that have a lot of big creatures that can't be countered and can't be killed by our red removal. So like the Loxodon Spider, Zoo, Collected Company decks. And mostly things with Loxodon Spider. That card's pretty miserable.
Just Loxodon Spider.
That's the worst case. Like, don't want to play against that card.
So green-white hate bears.
Yeah,
probably not good.
Yeah. They have Vial too to like get their other guys in. So that's probably the nightmare matchup.
Fair enough. So, and then anything that you're just like you consider a buy. Like if you sit down and see your opponent play, turn one Tron land or something like that.
Affinity is a nuts matchup for this deck, and the reason why that is, in addition to having all the Grixis tools that are traditionally great against Affinity, we also have Mutavaults to block Etch Champions, which is their normal card to really get in and punish these mid-range and control decks.
Fair enough.
The other spell-based combo decks are great because none of our cards in the main deck are sorcery speed, so we're just never tapping out, and we're deploying our threats at their end step after they don't do anything, so we just have a really strong tempo game against those combo decks.
All right, well, this sounds excellent. Pretty innovative, of course. We expect nothing less from you, Jeff, so thank you for taking the time to cite us in.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
All right, you guys stay tuned for more action here at the Invitational in Las Vegas.